Love podcasts, hate nonsense. It's the PoliticsJOE podcast.
Traffic?
I don't know. It depends how you feel about what I just said. Finn Taylor already made the joke last week that it's the opposite for him. So that one's taken.
He loves nonsense, hate podcasts.
Have you got anything else? Or So Fight Joe's and Tom Usher is with us.
Yeah. Hi, guys. Hi, everyone.
You might know Tom Usher from The Mat, or you might know him from championing men's mental health.
The Mat?
The Mat. Is that not what you play on? I don't know. Is that not where
I don't play on anything.
Is that not where you do your boxing?
No. Well, yes. But we do wrestling and jiu-jitsu on the mat, yeah. The mats, you call it, with an S. And then
Oh, mats plural, sorry.
Yeah.
It's not you don't have one big mat. It's
no, because there's usually like a succession of mats
okay.
joined together to make one holy matrimony.
That's a nice segue because Succession is a TV show and Adolescence is also a TV show.
Oh, yeah.
Which we're going to briefly talk about today,
Okay.
but we're also going to be talking about, well, more specifically, should we actually just tell them where this idea came out of?
Where did it come out of specifically?
Well, we went for a coffee yesterday, didn't we? And then we were talking about this, about
Millennials.
and why millennials
over.
the party's over.
The party is over. Basically, I think a lot of us now, aging millennials, I'm 37, and I've started to notice a lot in my friendship groups and people I see on social media, that my mutuals and stuff that I've actually known for a really long time now from just being online, like people that I've known from just Twitter and Instagram for like 10, 15 years almost now. I've just started to see a massive shift in kind of mentality between the idea that obviously this is what happens when you get older anyway, but I feel like it's more of like a psychological thing where when we were younger, I feel like we kind of all felt invincible and felt like the party was going to last forever. And we acted as such in terms of how we caned it. Like we were all caning the drugs and drink in a heavy way, or I think in a way that I think our generation has done more than any generation that's come after, and any generation that I've noticed that were older as well. No one was really hitting it as hard. But I feel like now specifically, obviously, we are older, but also there's a real sense that from everyone, I think, younger people and older, that the party's over and that we've kind of all had our fun, and now it's time to like, not like hunker down and get some hard work done, because no one actually feels like doing that either, but it's more like the good times feel like they're over, specifically because I think everything just feels like it's on a downward decline kind of thing, but also there doesn't really feel like there's as much to celebrate, as much to party about, if that makes sense. I know you don't really party about anything, it's kind of just mindless, but it felt like even in my early 30s, it felt like there's still a glimpse, there's still a glimmer of like something to cling on to, some kind of hope and some kind of reason to celebrate being alive. And then as you kind of, I'm not like depressed, by the way.
Morning.
I'm just saying, I have been depressed, but I'm just saying, I know it sounds like I'm depressed, but I think this is more of a general trend that I've noticed. And I've noticed it even among kind of celebrities. There's just a growing sense of kind of sobriety as well. We were talking about.
That's where we got this. This was all born out of sobriety, right? Because we were talking about like a number of one mutual friend and then like a number of other people who had gone sober in the last couple of years. And we were talking about why is it specific to, I mean, it's happening obviously across a broad age category, but we were talking about, not to be rude, but your specific age category. And why is it that actually, I would say specifically men that I know between 35 and 37 are going stone cold sober?
Yeah, well, I've been sober for times in my life before. Like I went sober for about a year. It was actually, a year. And that was good. I think it was more of a thing just to see if I could. And now I've been not last year. I think I drank too much last year, but the year before I was sober for about 6 months. And then this year I've been sober for like 3 months. And I think what it is, maybe not with men specifically, but also with everyone, I think, is that we've kind of run up against a brick wall, and it's kind of like a really sharp like shock of mortality, I guess, in a way where suddenly I don't feel as good. Suddenly the party doesn't make as much sense. suddenly the way that we were caning it, i.e. in that kind of reckless, abandoned way in which we were going to live forever and the party was going to carry on forever, it's suddenly you come to a slow realization or quite a fast realization that it isn't, and that you are aging, and that also that partying really, unless it has some kind of ulterior kind of meaning behind it, is quite hollow. But if you're partying just for partying's sake, and then that all kind of ties into the stuff, you know, especially in cities like London and Manchester and across the UK, really, that everything's getting really expensive. The parties are getting more kind of elitist. I think it was Sherelle, who's like an amazing DJ. She said that partying now, raving is becoming elitist. It's literally becoming a luxury that you could, like, you go to like not Printworks, but like Drum Sheds, the new one in IKEA. And it's like 60, 70 quid just to go to a fucking rave. Or can I swear?
There's a barrier to entry.
Yeah, it literally is a financial barrier to entry. And it's like, what, 70 quid? And I used to go raving every weekend. I used to go partying every weekend. So what, am I going to be spending 70 quid a week just to get in? And then that's on top of...
And that's before you've done anything.
Exactly. That's before the drugs and the drink and stuff that you're spending on. And it's like...
Not that we're advocating for that.
We're not advocating that. We're specifically advocating for sobriety. But yeah, I think...
We're not doing that either.
That's all of that stuff combined means there's a reason why it feels like the party's over, because everyone's kind of getting squeezed into more and more smaller spaces and also more irregular spaces, like clubs are just closing.
Well, also that, we were talking about that sort of escapism that I suppose people would be able to seek through going clubbing or going to a gig or something like that. And it's not really escapism anymore, because it's actually sort of a trap. It's almost like a doom loop. I'm not saying obviously this has happened across generations, but it's specific to this point in time where you could quite easily draw yourself into a financial hole just by trying to let off some steam. Yeah,
for sure. And I feel like that, the reason why a lot of your generation and younger Gen Z, the reason why they've kind of taken up sobriety so much, and I feel like the reason why they've looked at us and been like, oh, I don't actually fancy being like them lot, is because everything now is so expensive and the barriers are so high just to have a party, that why would you treat it in the same reckless way that it's going to be there forever and it's always going to be good, it's always going to be accessible, because it just isn't.
You can't be reckless.
Yeah, you can't afford to be reckless. You can't. Like back in the day when I was going raving, I'd go to like I'd be going to like Fabric, I'd be going to like Matter, which is in the O2, I'd be going to like rinse and forward nights, basically every 2 weeks. And there would be that consistent thing. There'd be like Plastic People, there'd be like the Alibi, there'd be the Nest, and that's just in Dalston. And there were so many clubs all around London that you could just go to if you just fancied it. Oh, I just fancy, I'm on a night out, I'll just go fancy popping in there after. And now it's like I have to plan my whole social life like towards this one destination that thousands of people go. Drinks are a tenner, tickets are 70 quid.
That's
do you know what I mean?
Beer.
And that's what I'm saying. And then it gets to the point where it's like, why would young people be like, oh, I love that lifestyle, I love doing that all the time? Because it's A, unaffordable when wages have stagnated, and B, it's becoming a thing that's almost like a destination. And it's not becoming, I think with partying specifically, it felt like escapism, because you were escaping the idea of, you were escaping the pressures of modern life by going to a small place that was cheap and that was accessible and it was fun. And now it feels like raving in itself has become kind of like symbolic, like it's become like emblematic of modern life, where it's really accessible, it's really inaccessible, it's really expensive, it's really elitist. And so you're kind of almost reminded in the party, oh fuck, it's £10 that beer, oh fuck, it's £70 to get in. You're already reminded of the financial pressures you have whilst you're even doing it. You can't ever switch off from that even whilst partying, which is why escapism feels kind of
and you can't try anything new. And I think that what you're talking about being able to go to somewhere like Dalston and there being a selection of venues that you could just like pop into and decide if you like it or not and then leave. You can't do that now. Everything, as you said, is sort of like a narrow path. I have to go here. It is so expensive. I have to have a nice time.
Yeah, exactly. And there is a pressure to be like, I need this to be the best night ever. So you take loads of pictures of the light show and it's like, oh wow, I had the best time. And then everyone's on their phone.
It's hard for new artists, right?
Huh?
It's hard for new artists.
Yeah, I think there was a whole discussion about I don't think we want to get into that really, but like there was a whole discussion about like Boiler Room recently and how they've
we can. I love putting in a right to reply this early in the morning.
Like I have my issues with Boiler Room, but in a way they also have launched a lot of careers. But then basically there's been a whole thing about how they're owned by kind of KKR, which is an Israeli company that also has like very large hands in funding kind of the genocide that's going on in Palestine. And obviously a lot of people, if you're a left-leaning company, which you're meant to be, i.e. dance music is inherently political, it's inherently left-wing, then you are meant to be representing those values. And by being, as much as they've made a statement saying we're not a part of the genocide, or we don't believe in those values, we don't believe in the genocide, we support Palestinian rights, we support...
I was going to get it up because I think that's the sort of thing that you can't really get wrong.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, they have put it on here. Shall I read it out?
Legally, I'm allowed to... Well, you guys can say it. I don't want to get sued by Boiler Room.
September 2021, Boiler Room was acquired by Dice. All prior investors were removed from the business and a new board was formed. At this point, Dice owned 100% of the company. Then Dice sold Boiler Room to Superstruck January this year, the second largest festival group in the world, who are themselves owned by KKR, which has investments that categorically do not align with our values. No Boiler Room staff at any level held any ownership or voting rights in the company and had no control over the sale. We're also unable to divest because we have no say in our ownership. I'm reading out the statement just to be...
Yeah. And
we will always remain unapologetically pro-Palestine. We continue to adhere to BDS and PACBI guidelines regarding artist programming and brand partnerships and engage with Palestinian artists and organisers in order to formalise our internal policies in line with this commitment.
Yeah, so what is it, PACBI?
Yeah.
And those guys made a statement saying Boiler Room are actually compliant to BDS or whatever. And at the end of the day is that I'm not Palestinian. I'm like aware of the situation and obviously support Palestinian rights and Palestinian right to kind of freedom. But at the same time as in, I have no lived experience of it. So I'm just sitting there being a commentator from the outside. And so if they make a statement and they're genuinely in the movement and they're Palestinian people doing that stuff, then I have to respect it. But at the same time, the only thing I have an issue with is Boiler Room basically just gets to say, hey guys, I know we're having a bad time and we're owned by a bad company, but we still really are left wing. So please keep buying our merch and still please keep like making us money, which is then going to KKR. And it's like, I don't have a problem with, like, of course, no one, it's not up to the management. It's not up to the people who work at Boiler Room because they're all going to be like usually very left wing. They're going to be pro-Palestine. They're going to be very politically aware. And I totally understand that they wouldn't have no idea of anything going up in upper management or who they're sold to. But at the same time, as in the very basic thing is that they are essentially art washing. They're art washing.
Is that what you called it? I was trying to think in my head, would it be like, because I was like, what's the equivalent of sports washing?
Yeah.
I was trying to, or green washing.
It is art washing, and it's just basically them being like, hey, we're still your mates, we're still really cool, we're still left wing. Please keep buying our Palestine t-shirts, please keep buying our merch and giving us money, which then directly goes to KKR. It's like you can't get away from that fact that it does directly fund that, even though, they are supporting Palestinian artists and they're supporting, as a, like, vocally, they are still supportive of left-wing causes and stuff. And so that's the kind of rub that I have. But basically the discussion is that they launch a lot of artists and they launch a lot of musicians. But then it becomes again where it's like you have to be on Boiler Room to get launched. You have to be like, as a DJ, you have to, and a lot of them don't, a lot of the guys play for free. Like, they're not getting paid to be on Boiler Room. You do it for free for exposure, which is the classic thing of we can't pay you, but we can give you exposure. And it's like, well, yeah, I get you get the exposure, but is that the only way that an artist now or a DJ can get launched is by having to go on a thing for free? Like, it's the same as me being like a graphic designer and giving like someone like a portfolio for free or whatever. It doesn't really make any sense. But so that was the thing about
There's a lot
artists.
of stuff that you do for free in the arts now.
Yeah.
I suppose you could kind of include journalism in that, but I mean the number of emails you'll get from like very wealthy, very profitable companies, who will
still trying it.
Who will you'll be like, what's the fee? And people will be like, oh, who's she to ask the fee? Because it's my job. And often, if it's like an hour slot, you'll have to do sort of 2 hours prep. So that's 3 hours work to not be paid for that. It's quite outrageous. And then they'll say something like, it's exposure. Exposure to who?
Yeah, well, this is it. And
you're going to make money off of what I say.
Yeah, and this is it with the, with it.
We're sort of deviating a little bit, aren't we? I suppose the sort of the upset, park the Palestinian cause.
I just wanted to.
No, I don't want you to say sorry. I don't want you to say sorry at all. I think it's actually, because we've been talking about it for ages at the desk, so actually it's quite nice to talk about it on the podcast, but park that for one moment. One of the points about Boiler Room, which is, I suppose, is what's happening to the club scene across the UK, is that a very large corporate, perhaps say an investment firm, maybe a hedge fund, something like that, will look at a profit-making club and they'll buy it.
Yeah.
And that changes the dynamic of what goes on in the room on the night. Yeah,
exactly. The end of the day is that you can't get away from the fact that all corporations are inherently right-wing. Big business is inherently right-wing. And you can't get away from the fact that if a big business, a big corporation takes over your small, cool left-wing thing that is all about culture and arts and supporting left-wing values, then they are going to inherently change those things, those dynamics, that outlook into profit margins.
I think that's where it comes from, where the feeling of control comes from, right? Where an environment feels controlled.
Yeah. And it has to be by very nature for it to make money. You have to suddenly be like, oh, the drinks are really expensive. It's like, yeah, because they're trying to make money off you. Like, oh, it's really expensive to get into the Boiler Room Festival. Yeah, because they're trying to make money off you. And they have to make money because they've got investors, they've got shareholders, and that's how a big corporation works. It's right-wing, it's exploitative. That is the very nature of it. You can't get a big corporation who's, we're a big corporation, we make loads of money, millions of quid a year, and also we're also your friend and we're also supporting left-wing values. Those two things just do not mix. They just clash inherently. That's the very nature of it. And so for people, the thing that galls me about Boiler Room and the thing that galls me about big business techno, we call it, was it business techno or like whatever, but
business techno.
This business techno is this kind of thing where it's like massive techno DJs now are just so huge. They're just playing these massive festivals and it's kind of almost like they play a very specific type of techno that is like big room, kind of crowd pleasing techno that's very generic because they know it's going to make them loads of money. But it's the same kind of thing where it's like you're a corporation, you're selling a product and your product needs to make money. And if that product is dance music, they don't give a fuck if it's left wing or right wing or whatever the fuck it is, as long as it's making money. So this whole idea, the statement they make, they're doing that because they want to keep making money. That's what a corporation is doing, to make money. And I know I keep on saying it over and over again, but it's like, there's no other way around it. You can't actually escape that fact. And obviously you can, in itself, making a left-wing statement to be like, please, I know you're all left-wing, so we are still too, please still keep listening to Boiler Room. That means they're doing it to play on the hearts and minds of predominantly left-wing people who are into dance music so they can keep on making money as a big corporation.
Do you think this is a wider problem though, with how expensive rent is and how expensive it is to have a venue? Yeah. Like a lot of the venues, you were talking about Dalston earlier. Sorry, this is going to sound very London-centric, this podcast, so I apologise. But you were talking about Dalston. Dalston is like an area that my mum, when I said I was moving there, was like, why are you moving to Dalston? Yeah. Which was outrageous, by the way, because she's from Bermondsey.
Because even 20 years ago.
But what I mean is it was an undesirable location to be, which is why you could have these venues there, because the rent wasn't very expensive. Yeah. So now that it's become a desirable place for developers, is it the fault of the club and the club night, or is it the fault of the landlords? Is it the fault of the city planners who don't put in these rent controls? Yeah. You know, I'm just sort of trying to extrapolate it out a little bit, because I think it's very easy for us to sit here and be ideological and say, I would like my club nights to be independent. Yeah. But do you have the environment at the moment where they can be independent?
Nah, not at all. Obviously, it's being made harder and harder. And I feel like I'm not an expert on like the kind of city planning and how to run a club. I have no idea. Like, I have friends who used to be music promoters and stuff like that and all that kind of stuff. But I still don't really know about, the mathematics and the overheads and all that stuff. And not many people would unless you're involved in the business. But I've seen how incredibly small the margins are, like, and how incredibly tough it is for clubs. Like, even for someone as profitable, even for someone as institutional as Fabric, for example, I know that they're, some weeks they won't break even on nights and stuff like that. And obviously
they want them out of that area though, don't they? They're right by Smithfield Market, which is in central London. Yeah. It's an EC postcode, isn't it? They want them out.
It's EC1, and it's like, and they want to, obviously I think they got rid of Smithfield's Market. The Billings.
It's going, yeah.
Yeah, and because they want to get that area, they want to get that area out so they can make money.
Develop it, yeah.
And and obviously it's so cliche to bring it all back to capitalism, but it really is like even culture, even dance music, even something as kind of, I guess, spontaneous, or is meant to be spontaneous as dancing to music, has somehow been taken over and like capitalized or kind of like squeezed at every level so that it's harder and harder for it to happen organically. And that is, I guess, another part of the thing about the party's over, is because it doesn't feel organic anymore. There's nothing that feels like natural and spontaneous about it anymore. It just feels like, oh, you want to party? Well, here's this funnel. You have to go down this very long like funnel with loads of like obstacles you have to get over to go to the party. And then when you're in the party, there's loads of other obstacles that you're constantly thinking about. It's not like, oh, that's a party. That feels like a bit of a survival test. And obviously, you know,
that's what Shoreditch feels like, or actually a lot of East London feels like. I always feel it feels like playing house. Do you know where they sort of like, the area has been taken over by big developers and the land is very expensive and everything's been redone, but it's been redone in a way to look kind of like, I hate this phrase, shabby chic, where it's sort of like cosplaying the working class experience. Like this is how East London is. It's a bit sort of, it's a bit battered. The wood tables aren't varnished. Like the stones are a little bit grotty, but it's all done very controlled. Yeah.
Box Park is the ultimate kind of, I think Box Park was the quintessential version of that because it was in the metal containers. And so the whole thing was that every time you go to a Box Park, it's in a metal container. And isn't that really like kind of a bit rough around the edges and a bit like, oh, it's crazy. We're in a metal container.
That's the phrase, rough around the edges. That's
So I feel like I'm in a hip like place. It's all hipster and stuff because it's in a metal container when really it's just it's a really expensive plot of land. The metal container, the company that's in the metal container has probably spent tons for that rent. Like it's obviously, and I guess that's another thing as well. Dance music is, I guess, in a similar way to the kind of Shoreditch, is that it's something that's presented, or it's a product that's sold to you as spontaneous, free, like expression of love and expression of like cool hipster vibes, and it's a bit crazy, it's a bit wacky, but ultimately now that is now a product in the same way that a Box Park is, or like, you know, a hipster restaurant that's really expensive but, you know, is made to look, it's something that's presented as something that is, you know, like free, loving, caring, eclectic, when really now it's become just as homogenized in a product as you know, expensive property.
And it's making people miserable.
Yeah, it's making people sad, and it's making people feel like the party is over. It is though.
There's going to be people listening to this who are going to say, if you, I actually had a very in-depth discussion about nightlife with Sacha Lord. If you want to go and listen to the Manchester one.
Okay, yeah, well, I was going to say Manchester's the same. Like Northern Quarter is the same.
We're talking specifically about what we know in depth.
Yeah.
If you'd like to hear about Manchester,
you
can go and listen to the Sacha Lord one.
That's fair. He probably knows more about stuff like that as well than me.
There was something specific. We landed on this topic because we were talking about something specific about your age group. We were talking about the successive financial crashes that have led up to this moment.
Yeah.
And you were talking yesterday about graduating into the financial crash, into the recession.
Yeah, I graduated in 2009, and obviously the financial crash was 2008. And that almost felt like you were graduating into the tail end of basically, what was that thing that New Labour did with Blair, where it was like...
Which one?
Like the whole thing that he really tried hard to basically make Britain cool. And it was called like, was it like...
Well, like all the Britpop stuff.
Britpop stuff, but they were very, very good at doing the PR of basically making Britain cool again, and really kind of pushing that PR of how Britain was like a cool place to live. And because it, you know, we were like incredibly successful as a country in that point, obviously New Labour kind of installed loads of things that ended up fucking us over later on. But at the time, in the late 90s and kind of early 2000s, everything was great for like, in terms of like numbers go up, line goes up.
I'm going to cut you off where it just says everything's great. Blair, everything great.
everything great.
Everything was great.
With Blair. Obviously, no, it wasn't.
That's enough.
Obviously, it wasn't, for loads of people in the country. And now all of those kind of things that they laid, all the kind of eggs they laid are now hatching in horrible, brutal, savage ways later on. But the thing is that at the time, the country line goes up, basically. That's how it felt with New Labour, is that line goes up. And that basically line went down in 2008. And then ever since then, austerity came in as a result of that. And then there was 15 years of the Tories, which basically brought the country to its knees. And so
I always think about it as like the promise was delayed every year.
Yeah.
Do you know, sort of like, I think that from the beginning of austerity, 2008, financial crash happens. I was still a child. But you saw how that played out on your parents, and you saw that how that kind of changed what you were doing day to day. It was quite a dramatic difference what you were doing from
before and after.
Yeah.
Tangible vibe shift.
There was a tangible vibe shift. But you were like, right, we're in emergency mode now. We're in crisis mode. Yeah. So there was sort of this promise that the symptoms were going to alleviate, that it was going to get better again. And that then you went into 2010 and David Cameron's like hard choices and all of this. And you're like, okay, well, we get that because we've got to tighten our belts and we've got to pull the country back together and get it back on its feet. And there was sort of this like thing, I guess, in the back of everyone's mind that was like, it's going to get better. By the time that you're moving into the Brexit debate and then out of it into Theresa May and then into the pandemic, you're realizing it's not going to get any better. Yeah. And then I think the sort of the cherry on top of the misery of all of this, when I would say that actually people began to get sort of really grey, stale and pale, was when the governor of the Bank of England said no one's allowed to take a pay rise because we've all got to tighten our belts and we're all in this together. And you go, hang on a minute, fella. We've been doing this now for 16 years. My entire adolescence and all of my friends and colleagues' adolescence has been defined by tightening our belts. Yeah. At what point is it going to get better? Yeah.
My whole adult life has been a downward slope. Ever since I came out of work, out of uni into work, it's been a constant succession of downward spiral wages. I think wages have literally stagnated since that point in the country.
Since 2010, yeah.
I think and that's my whole working life. So I haven't known anything getting better. And the whole thing, and that's why the Labour getting into power, I think, was darkly funny in the way that they obviously, you have to get in, politically, you have to tell a story of change. Otherwise people just give up and don't care. But then as soon as they get in, they go, hey, tough choices. And it's really funny when I see Labour doing the tough choices thing, or Democrats as well. It's always, the kind of centre left. They're not obviously left, but centrist mainstream politics. They always say, no, it's so hard to make any positive changes. We really want to make positive changes, but we can't because our hands are tied, because, the laws take a long time and things take... And at the end of the day, then you see Trump coming in and he's like, hey, Greenland's going to be a casino now and fucking it's illegal to not, worship Elon Musk and all these weird, kind of insane things that he's just declared into law or declared into... Do you know what I mean? He doesn't. They don't give a fuck. Right wing people were just like, "Hey, we're going to make it mental."
But it represents
straight away.
Something. It means the word. Look, we can get into a discussion another day about whether actually it will come to any fruition, and I think we both would say that it wouldn't. Yeah. But it feels like change. Like it feels like there's something that something could get better. And I mean, who?
That's the promise you said. It's the promise, though, isn't it?
It's the promise. But this is what I get annoyed about when you get some commentators or some sort of dismissive commentators who say things like, oh, well, who on earth would vote for Donald Trump? Who on earth would buy into that rhetoric? Yeah. It's like people who haven't got any money. Yeah. Like people who would like to see something get better.
Yeah, it's the same with Brexit. Brexit was the same thing.
Exactly.
You want things to be different and you don't really care about how different, in what way they're different. You just want it to be not as shit and slowly declining and painfully declining as it is right now.
And that's why the Democrats and why Labour were wrong as well. Well, Labour not so much at the moment, but they will be at the next election. But Democrats were wrong because they never promised anything different. Yeah. They essentially said, vote for us on a morality point.
Yeah. Or things might get worse and scary, but you don't know. But as long as they stay the same, which is shit, by the way, but as long as they stay the same, it's going to be okay.
Which is what the Conservatives promised as well. That was the Conservatives' entire electoral pitch, was like, it's going to get worse under Labour. Yeah. And everyone's going, well, fuck me, there's dust in my wallet now. What now?
And so specifically, like, kind of going back to the millennial thing, I think that politically as well, there is a sense that we have tried and failed. And whatever you think of, you know, leftist politics over the last 15 years, obviously it felt like at some point there was some kind of movement that you could like that you felt at least that you were a part of, and now there just isn't. Like, it's been thoroughly destroyed, or thoroughly, like, not debunked, because it's still, if anything, it's becoming more and more, it's been proven right more and more every day, but it's been, the press almost treat it like a kind of like a bad joke and stuff like that. And it's because it's been so kind of, I guess, put down consistently in the eyes of everyone, in the eyes of the public, because obviously it's been 15 solid years of people putting it down. I think that now leftist politics generally in the mainstream media, and I think that now there's kind of it's almost like it's turning in on itself, when we're starting to do a lot of infighting and all this kind of stuff, because I feel like we've tried, and millennials have tried their hardest to do a change. And that's why I think you see a lot of Gen Z being like, you know what, fuck it, I'm just going to join in with capitalism, because fuck doing what them lot do and being sad about it, and trying to make change and trying to make a difference, because it's never going to be different, it's never going to change. And so that's why I think you get a lot of this kind of hustle culture, 24/7 grind stuff that the younger generations do, because they see the parameters of capitalism, they see it's shit. They see that
they see their older brothers and sisters or aunts and uncles going to work from like 7 until 6
and having a bad time
with it. So, okay, there was a survey that was published. It was a UK youth poll. It was published by the Glasgow University's John Smith Centre. Work and money worry young people more than culture wars or climate. So 37% of young people were worried about finances, 23% about work, 20% about job insecurity. And then you compare that to how many people were worried about climate change, it was 10%, and social media, 14%. Yeah. That shift is dramatic, because if you compare that to how millennials were polled during that age category, climate change was way out. It's so interesting that I'm going to be so dramatic here. The job market and the social contract is so broken that young people now cannot afford to worry about climate change.
Yeah, because that's what I'm saying. The millennials were a big issue. They were like, we want to make societal change. We want to change the way politics works. We want to change the way society works. We want to, you know, they wanted to make big changes. We want to address climate change. Like, all this kind of stuff was big thinking, big issue. And now millennial, or the younger generations, are becoming like, not like myopic, but they're becoming slowly regressing into themselves, where they can't even see outside their own window. They can't even see beyond their own phone screen. And that's not anyone's fault. And that's not me saying there's any better or worse, because we tried these big issue things and it failed as millennials. But now Gen Z are just going, hey man, I just want to be able to fucking afford my rent at the end of the month. I just want a job that actually pays me enough.
It just doesn't feel exciting. Like, okay, I was watching... It doesn't feel exciting anymore, I don't think, to graduate or to even go to university, because the financial pressures are so huge. And not to get me wrong, they were bad when I was at uni. Like, you know, I do actually, there's like one thing that sticks in my mind very clearly, that one girl that we lived with when I was in second year asked me, why do I work on Saturday mornings? Because it means I can't go out on Friday nights. Yeah. And then she was like, you also work on Wednesdays. That means you can't go out on Tuesday nights. And I was like, would you just tell your mum to put the rent in my bank on time this month? Because I keep going into my overdraft. And by the way, I have to pay my own rent. Yeah. Anyway, that was just a side quest.
Good to air grievances.
Just let me get that out there. Why was I bringing that up? Oh yeah, it's not an exciting prospect to graduate, to move to a big city, somewhere like Manchester, Leeds, London, Glasgow, Edinburgh. It's not exciting to move to these places anymore, because you're going to end up in probably an 8-person shared house, paying £1,000 a month with bills, which, by the way, is way more than 50% of your salary.
Crazy.
The jobs on offer for graduates, you'll be lucky if you get a 23k paying job.
23, 25k, that's it. And that's minimum wage now.
Yeah. There is no... And then going back to what we were talking about at the beginning of this conversation, which is going out.
Yeah, on top.
You've got no chance. Maybe you're going out once a month, if you're lucky.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that
everyone feels like they're missing out.
Yeah, because you kind of actually are. And this is what I think it's like everything is getting squeezed. Everything is getting squeezed from all angles. And I feel like culture becomes kind of prey to that as well, where the margins are getting smaller and smaller and smaller for everyone. And from everyone basically all the way up to the top, it's 90% really. Like it's 0 to 90%. Like the 90% and above, they're still having a jolly, they're still clinging on. And that's why.
But are they having a good time? Because if you erase all of this culture, where are they going?
That's another thing as well, is that I remember, I think.
Do you know when you look at Coachella?
Yeah.
Do you know when you look at the sort of people who are at Coachella and there's no one in the crowd is ever having fun?
Yeah.
Because it's so expensive to go to.
That's the exact epitome of where like London nightlife is heading. That's like drum sheds for me, where it's like no one's even there to party. They're just there to be seen at the party. And it's like the only people that can afford to do that are people that are gonna be dry anyway and only care about their image and only care about being seen. Do you know what I mean? It all becomes like a socialite thing. I want to go to the club, and the club is a cool place to be seen. So I'm gonna be seen to be like, oh, here's the light show at drum sheds. Sorry if it's slagging off drum sheds, by the way. I don't actually hate you guys as much as I'm letting on. But
they've taken a real hammering, haven't they?
What I was going to say is,
someone did say the only funny bit of commentary I've ever seen about drum sheds was someone said that they were gentrifying the area before it was like it was an IKEA.
It was an IKEA, but
IKEA, the working man.
Yeah, the working man's furniture shop. There was one of my old mutuals on Twitter, Mags. I think he's called Perthshire Mags. I don't know. He said something that was always stuck with me about when Luigi Mangione killed the CEO.
Hey.
Allegedly killed. Sorry.
No.
When it what?
Nothing.
What?
Nothing was proved.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
The mayor would have you believe that.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it's true. When he allegedly whatever.
When he was caught
when that guy got shot, basically, when the health CEO got shot.
I don't know if there's a lot of evidence that he got shot at all.
He said something that essentially what's happening with these rich and ultra successful, ultra wealthy people is that they've created this savage world. And the fact that killing was a small reminder that they have to live in that savage world.
Can you stop saying that killing? I'm going to have to edit all of this out. And I don't have a lot of time today.
That incident reminded them, the top 1%, that they have to live in the savage world that they've created. And that's the same with culture as well, is that you create these barriers to culture so much, and the only people left that are going to be there are fucking dry. Do you know what I mean? If you create a party that's £70 to get in, a lot of the people there are going to be fucking posers. They're going to be dry. They're not going to be very much fun. They're going to be annoying rich people. That is what happens when you make culture elitist, is that it gets boring. Like, if you want to just sit there and listen to Mumford & Sons all fucking day, then be my guest. But at the end of the day is that's boring for a lot of people. And that's why you need more like working class representation in the arts all day long, because they are the ones that are bringing, like, they're going to bring a much more creative outlook and a much more diverse outlook. And that's what culture needs. It's constantly needing new ideas, fresh ideas, diversity. That's what makes it what it is. And when you make it secluded, when you make it like sealed off, then it becomes boring, becomes stagnant. And that's the funny thing, is that rich people are now going to have to live in a Shoreditch that's really boring. They're going to have to live in an area that has no clubs. They're going to have to live in a city that is essentially completely devoid of nightlife at some point, if it keeps on going the way it is, because they wanted it to be a nice little place for rich people. And if you don't like the noise, if you don't like the youth hanging out, doing stuff on the streets, then also it's going to be dry. But those people are what is making it exciting and fun and interesting to be here. And that's basically, how I feel about stuff.
So this is sort of where it all kind of, I'm going to make the biggest segue you've ever seen in your entire life, everyone. Okay, hold on. This is sort of part of the frustration about the adolescence conversation.
Yeah.
Because when Adolescence first came out and we were talking about it at the desk, we were talking about how sort of like, this is the first generation of kids that have been born in the financial crash. They have been born in the remnants of the recession, right? So these are like recession kids.
Yeah.
And we were talking about all of the sort of financial structures that are against them.
Yeah.
And look, we'll hold the social media conversation for 1 second.
Okay.
Because that's a whole other kettle of fish. When have I ever said that?
When have you ever said that?
these children are looking at their job prospects, they're looking at their housing prospects, they're probably living in homes that their parents rent.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of stability. Life feels very transient. It doesn't feel grounded.
Yeah.
How can you be excited in those sort of living conditions?
Yeah, what is to be excited for? And if the adolescence thing, I feel like it, obviously there was the press release by Labour about it, where they were like, we're going to show it in schools. And it's like, why are you showing a show aimed at adults trying to understand children's issues to the children who already understand the issues, and they're trying to, in the show, tell the adults about the issues painfully at times. The son has to literally sit him down and be like, hey, this is what this means. You're completely wrong about everything. And he's like, oh, wow, I can't believe it. That is the part of the show. And then you're going to show that to children being like, hey, isn't this crazy? It's like, they already know that. They live in that every day. They're in that. They already are telling the adults. They're trying to tell the adults. And I'm reading this book at the moment.
Can we stay on the school thing for one second and come back to that? Because the school thing is so interesting to me. Like I thought the one thing that show did so well was depict what it's like being in school at the moment.
Yeah.
And like the obvious glaring solution to that is schools have been out of money now for over a decade. Yeah. I look at like my family or my friends who work in schools, and their biggest complaint is there is not enough money. Yeah. It's the children, like the I can't remember his name, Jamie, is it, the protagonist, who get left behind because you're so squeezed for time and money. There's no teaching assistants, that you have to focus on the children who either have SEND issues or extreme behavioural issues or are so excellent that they'll definitely go to university, that the children like him get left behind because you can't look after them. Yeah,
and it was funny about what Keir Starmer said in his press release, where he was like, I wish there was a magic lever I could just pull and make everything better. And it's like, well, without trying to be too like Gary Stevenson about it, there is kind of a magic lever you can pull, and that is more funding into the schools, which and councils, which you've dramatically underfunded, and you're continuing to dramatically underfund, which is an ideological thing you've been doing austerity-wise since the crash, and it's never got any better.
No more money for the councils.
Yeah, and some of them are going bankrupt.
But some of them are spending in councils is outrageous. That's a conversation for another time.
Whatever, just more funding for schools is one direct thing. If you wanted to make schools better, give them more money so they can provide better services. It's really not that complicated. Obviously, I don't know how like local funding works with schools, but I'm pretty certain.
You would not believe some of the people who are managing the schools via the council, how much they're being paid.
Yeah.
People who are managing the schools, so like they're deciding like whether a school shuts, whether a new school is needed, what head teachers get allocated where. They're being paid, some of them about £250,000.
Yeah, I mean...
And then do you know what the teachers are being paid?
Well, it's
30.
Like 30, yeah. I think the bureaucracy of kind of the British civil service is something that everyone's been going on about.
Yeah, I really wish Jacob Rees-Mogg hadn't hijacked that, because we could have had a really good conversation about the civil service had he not been like, everyone's lazy.
Yeah, and I feel like, then when people talk about magic levers, we've been talking about austerity and we've been talking about, all that kind of stuff. And it's like the magic lever, if obviously there is no magic lever, but the magic button you could press is just to provide a bit more money into public services. It's not that crazy just to say, hey, we're failing these children because we have no money in schools. So why don't we give the schools a bit more money and see if that helps? At least that's an idea we could try.
And you could even do something radical. Like, hear me out here. This is really radical. You could regulate the tech industry. And then the money that you get out of that from them paying the correct amount of tax, you can put it into the schools.
Well, that's the thing we were talking about as well before, about how they say, oh, we're doing the Online Safety Act and it's going to clamp down on this like horrible behavior online. And it's like, so what is the horrible behavior that we're going to clamp down on? Like, we're going to clamp down on... Are we clamping down on Facebook? Are we clamping down on Instagram? Are we clamping down on Snapchat? Because that's where a lot of these kids, or most of these kids, are seeing the most vile, misogynistic, hateful stuff. That's where most of the horrible media...
just violence.
Yeah, violence.
Like you go onto some of these social media sites now and you will just be met with abject violence and you shouldn't see it.
Yeah.
I think it was... We're kind of like the first generation to actually have seen that online when we were kids.
Yeah, like the snuff stuff.
But you had to go looking for it.
Yeah, like deep, dark, like you'd get sent it in a text from like your uncle or your dad, and you'd be like, what the fuck
it wasn't
is this?
like opening up Twitter and then
yeah.
being like, whoa.
That's the thing, is that, you know, companies like Twitter and Facebook and or whatever, Meta and Twitter, they are the ones that actually control essentially what, and so you have Online Safety Act where it's like, okay, we're going to try and make online more safe. The first places you'd go, which everyone is online because there's now only about 3 or 4 websites that people even go on, is Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. But if you don't want to regulate that because you don't even want to tax them, so
you don't want to regulate that because we're in this really precarious situation at the moment, or relationship with Donald Trump. We're still trying to hold on onto that special relationship. I've been trying to work out this thought for like the past week or something. Maybe you can help me. For me, that conversation about Yemen and bombing the Houthis, the fact that it took place on a commercial platform on Signal, I actually thought was the most interesting part. How do I phrase this? Okay. It showed to me that the American government and commerce are inextricably linked. And that's going to sound like the most obvious statement I've ever made in my life. But I would say that this is the most social media minded government that America has ever seen. That they are essentially like, they would trust a commercial platform like Signal to have those conversations on. I don't think that's stupidity. I think that's an indication that somewhere like Silicon Valley and Washington, DC are inextricably linked. And Europe should be frightened by that, because the UK is trying to pass this online safety bill, but we've basically got all of this influx coming in from America. These social media companies are de facto deregulating the UK because they want to make more money out of us. And because we are so indebted to this special relationship and we're so desperate for it to continue, if Donald Trump says, listen, Elon is going to use X in the UK and he's going to pay a very minimal amount of corporation tax, we're going to go, let me bend over. And that's the end of it.
Well, there was, I think there was some guy who came on here the other day and he was talking about how essentially Britain is like become almost like an airship carrier for the US.
Vassal state,
Vassal state. And it's true.
He was Angus Hanton.
Big tech is very representative of that, because in essence, big tech is in one place in America. They set their own rules, and yet the global cloud that they kind of emit, the miasma, is that the word? You know, the poisonous cloud.
Sure.
the kind of the global coverage the global reach and the global influence that they have with big tech is unavoidable. And so whatever they do, however, as you say, however they deregulate in the US, it's always going to affect us, because we are literally just getting it in our phone, in our face, as soon as we wake up. In all of the social media websites that everyone checks and now lives on, that is essentially going to be a massive window into whatever deregulated content that America wants to show us. And so this whole thing of Online Safety Act is just basically like a paper thin like plaster over what is this huge kind of tsunami of deregulated social media and deregulated big tech, which we all now are kind of see as inextricable from daily life, when really it only existed for like 15 years, like 20 years really max. And yet we think, oh, we can't exist without it. It was like, we definitely can, or we could definitely regulate it if you were really about
It's just about regulating it. It's just about the sort of harmful, the sort of shocking content that's being shown. And I have this conversation with MPs often, and they'll say, yeah, I know, the sort of porn. And it's like, no, you have to go looking for porn. This is the thing. You have to go looking, like if you wanted to go on like Pornhub or whatever, you have to go looking for it, right? And you might see extreme content there, fine. What I think is the big issue is that you can open up any social media platform now and just see the most, you can just see an example of extremely rough sex that I don't think I think is very harmful for a 15-year-old to see. If they go looking for it, it's different. It's the fact that it's brought to them.
On like deregulated apps, like obviously there's no point getting like beat around the bush. Like Twitter has become slowly but surely kind of like a mainstream 4chan since it's been taken over by Musk. Like you can't really get away from the fact that it has become incredibly like hard right, and the content he kind of almost made this promise where he was like, we're trying to make it more open to, so there's going to be less, and even Mark Zuckerberg was saying we're kind of less moderation. It's like, that is a part of the promise, that the kind of Trumpian promise is no more red tape, no more regulation. And so if you say that stuff as your kind of mission statement, then of course that means there's going to be more extreme, violent, misogynistic content as a result of free speech and this kind of insane adherence to free speech at all costs. And that means whatever kind of regulation you're trying to do in the UK to be like, hey, we're trying to stop like children becoming like, you know, incels or whatever it is, then you can't stop that.
We're going to show adolescents in schools. That's going to solve it.
I mean,
I've got to go because work experience is here. Oh. But I know I hate that. But you'll come back, yeah?
I'll come back.
So Tom and I sit next to each other and we talk all day, every day. It's really lovely.
It is really nice. You bully me all the time, by the way.
Shut up, because they're actually going to think that. They're going to be like, she never let him talk. And but also, speaking of work experience, I would love people to apply for work experience this summer. If you want to come in.
It's really good.
Just send me an email.
I will ask you questions, which might seem scary, but I'm trying to be your friend.
Stop. No. But basically, I only get, and I have a few emails about work experience, and they all come from the same university. And I'd love it if people who can't afford that university, like I couldn't.
Yeah.
But by the way, they do invite me back. They invite me there now to give talks.
That's good.
With no fee.
You showed that.
And I go, so not only could I not afford the fucking university, now you're inviting me to speak there for free. Oh. And I go, exposure. Exposure to what? A glimpse of the course. Give me a break. Anyway.
Exposure inception, that.
My email's in my bio. If you would like to come and do work experience with us this summer, I would love to hear from you.
Good idea.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.